Hello, podcast listeners. I hope you like heavy metal because that is the subject of today's podcast. We've got our good friend Tony, and he's even going to play a little ditty at the end of it. So make sure that you perk up, turn up the volume, and enjoy this episode of JJ Meets World. And before we get into that, I talk about Tucker's dream house and how it's a weird place that you wouldn't want to hang out in. All of this and more on today's episode of JJ Meets World.
1, 2, 3, 4. J.J. Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is! He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. J.J. has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirled as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called JJ Meets World.
I bought these things a couple years ago. They're called Hypertheticals, and they're written by Chuck Klosterman.
From Fargo.
Well, not technically.
Isn't he?
He's not. He's from a rural town outside of Fargo.
Oh, okay.
He went to college and then
Fargo-ish.
worked. North Dakota native.
There you go.
Okay. So it's 50 questions for insane conversations, and I thought we'd use one of these, okay? So I'm going to put this hypothetical to you. Imagine your dream house, whatever that house may be. Think of all the details you would like this home to possess, including furniture. You're suddenly given the opportunity to trade wherever you live now for this hypothetical home, and your mortgage will be whatever you currently pay. The home will be roughly in the same location as your residence.
Okay.
However, there's one odd caveat. This dream home is buried 2 miles underground. When you look out the windows, all you're going to see is dirt. In order to enter the residence, you have to take an elevator that travels down the 2-mile shaft at high speed. It's about a 5-minute trip. The elevator is comfortable, and there's a staff located above ground that provides 24/7 maintenance on the elevator. If something breaks or goes wrong with the elevator, you will be rescued immediately. Would you accept this underground dream home?
Yes, even though it wouldn't coincide exactly with how I'd want my dream home to be, but I would still take it.
What do you mean?
Because my dream home would actually be at the top of a tall building overlooking like a city. Like in my dream scenario, I've got like the full floor of like the top of a building.
Okay.
And
so
I
you
get to
still
look
get
out
it.
over
You have
things.
to take an elevator up to the top of this building where you get on another elevator and go straight down.
That's fine. Like I get that. And the
and
thing
you want the view to be part of it.
well, in my dream, that would be part of it. But since that's not going to work out, since this goes underground, I would still take it because it still sounds like you're getting an amazing deal. If I don't pay a mortgage right now, so heyo, that means this thing's for free. And so I would take that free home. Are you kidding me? And I would make an amazing underground bunker of a house. And then also at that point, I know that if we get nuked by North Korea, I got a place to go.
So here's the problem.
Did I just blow you away with my logic?
No, here's the problem with it. People probably don't want to visit you in your underground home.
They don't want to visit me now, and I'm cool with that.
There are some people, but like anyone who's claustrophobic would not go to your dream home.
That's fine.
Right?
I'm okay with
Also,
that.
what about the fact of like worms?
What about them?
There's worms everywhere, all around you.
Yeah, there's spiders everywhere right now up above here. I'd rather be seeing worms in my basement than spiders.
Oh, really?
Yeah, absolutely.
I watched a movie as a kid called Trilogy of Terror. And Trilogy of Terror 2, I believe, was released on the USA Network. So you know how quite quality that is. But in one, this woman, it's 3 different stories, and this woman is the lead in all 3 stories. And in the second one, she kills off her rich husband, and her rich husband is buried with the key to a vault where all of their money is. And so she and her lover decide they're going to dig up the body. Now, before he's even buried, the caretaker...
Oh, we've talked about this.
Have we?
On this show before.
Where there's the rat?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm glad I can bring this up again. Because
It's like-
the thing is when you're underground that far, you got to watch out for rats.
Yeah.
And so there'd be rats who would be chewing down all the way to your house. Don't get me wrong. I would take it as well.
I think we're in a part of the country, too, where we wouldn't have as many of the issues of, like, if you lived in a coastal city or near a fault line, where earthquake could come up and just totally mess up your house. We don't deal with that here. We do have a permafrost, so you'd have to dig at a certain time of year. But then I just feel like you would be fine. I feel like you might not even need as much heating if you're underground.
From my understanding about the soil composition of our area, is there's a lot of clay, and so the problem is the ground is constantly shifting around here. So anything a certain depth, you're not dealing with like a heavy, thick sediment. You're dealing with something mushy. I've always heard it said that if there was an earthquake around here of a high enough magnitude, that the clay would shake and it would actually liquefy itself. And so all the footings of everything would just kind of start to sink down.
Right.
And buildings would disappear like they were in a giant sinkhole.
I know what would be one big plus if I had a house that was underground like that. I could practice with a heavy metal band down there, and that would be totally fine.
You could.
Right? Because when you're playing heavy metal music, you're making a lot of noise.
I got an idea for Tucker's Shaft, is the band's name. Because the only place you can hear it is Tucker Shaft.
Down my shaft?
Yeah.
That'd be the first song. It'll be about Come Down My Shaft.
It's pretty exciting that you bring that up. So our guest today is Tony Mangnall, and he is a heavy metal enthusiast.
Yeah,
and he shares his love of heavy metal with us today. I learned something, and I'm going to tell you, I'm going to head home and I'm going to build a Spotify soundtrack of heavy metal proportions. So let's just kick into this thing, huh? Also, it's the first time we've had a musician who plays for us.
That's right.
This is exciting.
That's right. Also,
Tony's saying no. Tony's shaking his head no. He's over there. I don't know. Who's Travis Gilbertson? We didn't have anybody like that. Do you even listen to our podcast? New rule, our interview is going to be with a chair. Hello, chair.
Brent, if you're out there, write us a letter about how Tony's wrong about this.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, shout out to Brent and the $18 he sent to me, trips.
We love it. Thank you, Brent.
And thank you for correcting me, which is funny because Tucker at one point had corrected me and I said, nobody is going to ever notice that. But you did.
Brent noticed.
Because you've got the skills, dude. All right, let's get this thing going. JJ Meets World with the heavy metal edition.
JJ Meets World.
All right, my guest today is Tony Magnaphone-ish.
Yep.
The third.
Got changed at Ellis Island, but that was the
What was it
original.
originally?
Oh, Magnaphone-ish Bergstein. And they're like, I ain't writing that down. Welcome to America, Magnaphone-ish. Mangnall.
And he was probably an Irishman.
Yeah, definitely.
What's that like? Where's your family from?
I got a lot of German blood in me. I've got a lot of Scotch-Irish, a lot of Norwegian. I am a European mutt, basically. Okay. I sunburn pretty easily.
Well, those first two really lead into our subject because they're fiery, angry people, the Germans and then the Irish.
Yeah.
So it's no surprise that you're into heavy metal.
I am into heavy metal.
My experience with heavy metal is in the show House, they constantly think that whatever is ailing the person is a heavy metal, and it never is. I don't even know why they bother writing it into the script. So...
Right. Yeah.
Is that the type we're talking about?
No, not so much the periodic table of elements. It's more of a type of music.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's really something I've been into since I was probably 13, 14 years old. It's a good age for people to get into it. Heavy metal, I guess, at its core, as people commonly understand it, is just loud and fast, obtuse, aggressive. I would say it's the music of the id. It requires... quite a lot of testosterone to perform it really well, I believe. Not to say that women can't perform it well, but it sure helps if you've just got that lizard brain in you that I think every guy has in them. It reaches back through time and history and space, and it's that part in us that has that destruction gene. It's got that rage, that ability to really pop off, and I think heavy metal's there to channel fundamentally that.
I think of an interview with Maynard Keenan I once saw. I was the lead singer of Tool and Perfect Circle and a few other stuff, Pussifer. And it was an early interview when he was originally with Tool, and the interviewer was asking him, doesn't it feel bad to be singing all this negative music, to be engaging all these negative emotions? And his response was what we're dealing with is just aggression, and we're dealing with aggression in probably the most positive way you could imagine doing it, by making some art, playing some music, and it's not evil, it's not bad, it's aggressive. And that was the first time I'd ever heard of it defined in that way.
That's right. It's definitely a catharsis type of music, and there is that sort of nihilistic message to it, and that's a big philosophical conversation that I've had that I've really enjoyed. Is art of more value if it's not nihilistic, or if it has more of a positive message? Can you draw more from it? But I don't think we need to go that deep here. I just used to just overlook kind of that part of it, and now I pay a little more attention to it, just because it's not always great to focus on things like that, but at the same time, there is a music for every point in your life. There's a music for when you're at the prom and you're feeling depressed. There's the navel-gazing stuff. There's the music for when
Why were you depressed
happy.
at your prom?
Oh, jeez. Yeah.
Shouldn't that be like a first love?
Because he had to keep the sleeves on his tux.
Yeah, that was really tough, man. That
Is
was
that a true
difficult.
story?
No. But
Be a lot better if it was.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, my first prom, I was not into heavy metal quite yet, and I was way less cool because of it. So
Okay, so what were you listening prior to heavy metal?
I think my first album was, well, I guess you could say it was metal of a sort. It was Europe Final Countdown was my first CD, but then I also had a lot of Sir Mix-a-Lot, definitely Vanilla Ice. I had the La Bamba soundtrack. I played the heck out of that. Simpsons Sing the Blues.
That was a good album.
Yep. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of Their Shell. That whole Pizza Hut promotional
yeah.
tour. Oh my God. I could
don't
sing
know
that
if
front
you've
to back.
listened to the podcast, but we bring that up on a regular basis.
Oh my God. Well, I've still got my tape sitting at home.
Tony is one step ahead of me with that, is that he's got lyrics memorized for the whole thing. Like, he could probably sing most of the songs.
Yep. I could
Wow.
do that. And probably for Little Mermaid. But I think that's true for most people our age.
If you ever want to go viral, you should just do a metal cover of one of the Turtles Coming Out of Our Shell songs.
that's
Just record it on
awesome.
YouTube and just put it out there.
That's awesome. Check this. You got your pad. You got your deck. You got it rolled. You break your neck. You got it wired. You're in control. You ride the bull. You're a tube and mole. Nothing cracked with being underground, especially with that gnarly sound. It's boss. It's awesome. It's out of sight. Best thing you do all day and night. Yo, man, you're tubing. That's the rap section from that song on that turtle tape.
Yes.
I had to drudge that up from the bottom of my psyche, but there it was. I think I screwed up a few words.
I wore out that tape though too. I was big into that. It didn't bother me that their mouths didn't move while they were singing.
Right. Right.
So, I mean, those are some pretty interesting things that you wouldn't think are the gateway drug to heavy metal. So, describe how you got into heavy metal to begin with.
I know the exact moment. It's kind of a magical night for me. It was the Stutzman County Fair was in town, just outside of Jamestown, and I was on one of those rides that not only do you go around and around, like, you're upside down, but the capsule you're in is also on a large arm contraption. So you're going around this large arm, and your capsule itself is going in circles.
The zipper is what I'm familiar with that.
Yeah,
that
it might
ride.
be. Yeah,
but they probably have many different, the slaughterhouse. There's probably many different ride titles.
You're up in the air, you're upside down, and I was on this particular ride. I had a pretty cute girl next to me, and all of a sudden, Metallica, Enter Sandman, comes on the loudspeakers while the ride kicks up. And it just, for whatever reason, the moment, the adrenaline of the ride, the music, the thundering drums, and the awesome guitars, it all came together for me. And I just felt like $1 million at that moment. I went out and bought Metallica's Black Album the next day, fell in love, and then went and got the tablature music book for that. We had a cheap old acoustic guitar sitting in my house. And so tablatures are, if anybody's interested in learning guitar, tablature is such a great way to get into it. It's basically paint by numbers. They tell you what fret on what string to put your finger and just pluck that string. And if you listen to a song and you figure out where to put your fingers, it all starts to come together really quickly. So that's what I started doing with that whole first Black Album, and the rest is just heavy metal history. I just fell in love and found some good friends that introduced me to a lot of other great stuff, and took off from there. So
that girl enjoy the ride as well?
Well, Becky was her name. She had a good time. We didn't I don't know. I don't think I was her Prince Charming, but that was a great moment
Becky,
for me.
if you're
Was
out
she
there,
sitting there
Tony
being
misses
like,
you.
I'd love if this was Garth Brooks instead. Standing outside the fire would be a great tune.
Yeah, I don't think she was digging it in that moment as much as I was. And that's what I said too. Is having the connection between heavy metal and testosterone can't be overstated. I think there's a lot of women out there that like heavy metal, but I think mainly guys will take to it more. I just think testosterone, the actual hormone, has a lot to do with the construction of the music.
What is the difference between heavy metal and punk?
Punk is loud and aggressive for sure, but it's a lot more simple. Heavy metal tends to focus on more virtuoso style music, really accomplished musicians playing really loud, fast stuff, big scales, big arpeggios. Punk is all about simple song structures, chords. Just it's pretty much all of heavy metal stripped away, except for that smoldering core of aggression. So punk is pure aggression at its core. Now, again, you find some really virtuosic punk bands out there that can do some really amazing things with their instruments too. And I would say the thing that really sets great punk bands apart is a bass player. I would say you look like a band like Dead Kennedys. They're
band.
Yeah.
Rick Danko.
Rick Danko?
Or that's his name, right? From the band.
Oh, you're thinking... Well, I'm thinking Jello Biafra is probably the most famous guy from the band Dead Kennedys, because he won a lawsuit against Tipper Gore.
Got it.
And,
I'm thinking of Rick Danko from the band The Band.
Oh, okay.
He's the first thing that I ever I think he's the first time I noticed a bass player in a band who was singing, who was like taking on melodies and singing while playing bass. But anyways.
Yeah. Well, just to bring it back to just punk at its core, it's pretty simple stuff. It's 3-chord rock and roll. It's loud, it's aggressive. You don't have to overthink it. You can pick up your instruments, and 2 weeks down the road, you're playing shows. In fact, I think the Ramones were doing that. I think they had their instruments in their hand for like 2 weeks, and then they're out there playing, and they're legendary. And I remember when I was first getting into heavy metal, I didn't much care for punk. It was too simple. They didn't have all the big pretentious guitar solos in it, and that's what I was really into at the time. But throughout the years, I met a lot of people that were really into punk and showed me some really great bands, and I fell into it. Now I play in a Misfits cover band frequently with some guys here in town, so we'll do a lot of Halloween shows, and we've done a New Year's Eve show, so hopefully I can pull that out and do it again. But that's a ton of fun. Punk is fun.
What's the next holiday you'd like to aim for one of your shows?
Oh, geez. If I could do an Easter heavy metal show, I think that would just be... That's top of the list.
I would dye my eggs and show up at that show.
Dye them black. Black is the blackest black.
I don't know how Valentine's Day would be great. Like
Yeah.
a nice couples metal concert.
That would be great.
Like a metal dinner theater.
Man, can you imagine getting just pissed drunk at a metal show
Right.
with your date, throwing some chairs across the room, going home, swigging
Sucking
some more
face.
whiskey. Yeah, just making out like there's no tomorrow. Heavy metal, baby. That's what it's all about.
So when you're meeting you're talking to someone and if you're like, I've never really listened to metal before, what do you think I should start with? Just Joe Schmo off the street. In what direction would you point them to listen first?
Probably like Metallica, Black Sabbath. They're really accessible, really loved across the board. Black Sabbath especially is pretty legendary. They get a lot of most of the credit for starting many different genres of heavy metal. And my path was basically Metallica, and then I discovered White Zombie, which I think is another really accessible, really cool metal band from kind of that late 80s, mid 90s era. And as you start to listen to metal, you start to clue into the awesome guitar tones and the awesome, just how huge the drums are. And it's all about bigger, faster, louder, meaner. And as you go down that hole, as you've heard Black Sabbath too many times, you still like it, but you're like, man, I just want something a little heavier. And you find Metallica, and then you get in all of that in what's a genre called thrash metal, and then you're like, man, I want something just a little heavier. And then you're finding, death metal and black metal and
industrial metal?
and yeah, definitely and pretty soon you're listening to stuff like Emperor and Goat Whore and Acid Bath and yeah, it's quite a journey, and it's very inaccessible stuff. I mean, if you're not used to listening to heavy metal and somebody puts on Acid Bath or Goat Whore or Emperor,
Anal sphincter.
exactly, you're going to be like, this is terrible. I don't know what they're saying. I can't hear a thing that's going on. It just sounds like noise. So it's definitely like coffee, a bit of an acquired taste. But if you can get there, there's something going on there for sure.
My introduction to heavy metal came from my cousins, who were big Iron Maiden fans.
Mm-hmm.
And Iron Maiden is one of my favorite arguments for people who say that they do not like heavy metal and that heavy metal is just noise. Because I like to be like, well, they've got a little tune called Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, which is a wonderful epic poem that they put to some pretty bitchin' sounds. And they played that in my high school English class.
Oh, awesome.
And so I remember thinking, like, I get to listen to Iron Maiden during English.
Oh,
yeah.
sweet.
Thanks, Mrs. Warner. But heavy metal has had a major, major influence, not only in other genres of music, but also into pop culture. I think when you say heavy metal, you can conjure up a couple different ideas of what the people who play it, the people who listen to it, and it's sort of counterculture in a lot of ways, but it's embraced as this idea of you either really like heavy metal or you really dislike it. And the people who dislike it, I think, are the ones who really don't give it a chance.
Boy, I'd have to agree. I mean, I feel like we can all tap into that one part, that small thing in ourselves that's just pure aggression. It's in there. It's in all of us, I think. So
right, like imagine if they had heavy metal during the Roman Empire. That's all that would be played in the Colosseum.
Right.
It would be nonstop Tool.
But and also it's also a genre that gets from people who feel that music has to have a very clear melody sitting on top of everything else, and that there needs to be this sort of pretty hook and stuff. You know, rap gets a lot of the same baggage, where it's like they think it's about the same thing that other music is about, whereas rap has more to do with lyrics and with beats and with wordplay and timing, and metal has a lot to just do with aggression and making sound that mirrors that aggression, you know, that illustrates it on some level. You know, there's, you know, country music is not going to show you the amount of aggression I feel, but this will.
Yep.
Right?
Exactly.
And then just boom, just take it down.
Do you think it's a great way for people to get that aggression out, or do you think it just brings it to the surface?
I think it's a catharsis. I think it's a great way to get it out.
Get on top of it just a little bit more.
Yep. Yeah, I would say it's a way to get it out. I don't think it cultivates bad behavior in people. I've been in the scene for a long, long time, and I've never seen that. So I just feel like it's a voice for an experience that people have, and they need to get it out.
Here's the first time I paid to see a heavy metal show. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure this band is considered heavy metal. But I saw a Gwar show.
Oh, hell yeah.
And what I think is great about Gwar...
No, those guys are acid jazz, JJ.
Well, I don't know if it's a genre, because they're kind of, in a way, parodying what they're doing at that time.
Yep.
If you've ever seen an interview with them when they're in their Gwar makeup, I mean, they are kind of poking fun even at themselves as part of this, being, you know, they're like, oh, so where's next? Well, we're going to play in Hell next and Albuquerque after that. And they're funny. And I think that they, you know, that's something that people started to identify with a little bit more when they saw this really grotesque, you know, these costume pieces. But at the same time, they sit down with Phil Donahue in full costume and will do a full interview. And they're funny and charismatic during that time. So I think that was a real eye-opener for some folks. I saw Gwar at Playmakers when it was still Playmakers. And I saw Insane Clown Posse 2 days after that.
Man.
It was a hell of a week at
You
Playmakers.
did a lot of laundry, huh?
I did. And then the second show I went to...
And there was a Gallagher concert right after that.
Oh, I wish. When was the last time Gallagher made his way around here? Do you know that Gallagher's brother tours around as Gallagher, pretending that he's the Gallagher? But then you show up and you're like, that's not the same guy.
Yep.
The
Hammer-O-Matic. This isn't right.
Yeah, right? Like, come on, guys. So the next show I saw, and this is where I think heavy metal has really come into the national conscious, and it's more acceptable probably now than it's ever been before. I bought a ticket to something called the River's Edge Festival in Harriet Island in St. Paul, and it's a little island that you walk down a big street that they had to close off, and you saw a concert on this island. And night 1, it was Tool. Night 2, it was the Dave Matthews Band.
Wow.
And I would say that, oh God, like the Tool night, it's going to be all like the people wearing black studded collars and having big mosh pits. No, these two audiences mixed with each other in a way that you can only imagine.
Yep.
And it was all about the love of music. And I had a great time at Tool, and I had a great time at Dave Matthews.
I will say this: you go to a Ween concert, their crowd is exactly what you're picturing in your head right now. That it is a Ween concert. That's to go against the notion of, I was really surprised by the fans for this group. I've seen Ween in concert twice. It's exactly what you would think.
You go to a Tom Jones concert, and it's exactly what you think too. And you think to yourself, like, good God, I am the youngest person here by about 45 years. True story. So talk about some of the concerts you've been to over the years.
Well, I have seen Tool as well. I've seen them a couple times.
Jelly.
Tool is a great hard rock, heavy metal band. I don't know where you draw the line between the two, but if you're at a Tool concert and you're in a mosh pit, you're doing it totally wrong, because Tool is like a thinking man's progressive heavy band, and you're kind of there to be blown away by what they're doing up there. If you're moshing to a Tool song, you really don't get Tool.
Tool is a band of geniuses.
Yeah.
Like, they are all fucking geniuses.
Yeah.
And they sort of each come in and layer their own piece into the song. So yeah, if you are a devout Tool person, you're like, you just want to like be bathed in the music that they're making, and you want to hear everything, and you want to hear the honey from Maynard's voice, and you want to hear the drumming, and you want to hear all that.
Exactly. Now, I remember the first time I saw Tool was in 1998 at Ozfest in Somerset, Wisconsin. I didn't even really know who they were at the time, so I didn't appreciate what I was seeing enough at the time. And it was daytime, it was outdoor. Tool was really an arena rock band with a light show, stuff like that. But a few years later, after I'd gotten into the scene and I fell in love with that band, my friend Ryan Vetter and I...
Your buddy Vetter?
My buddy Vetter and
Any relation to Eddie Vedder?
No relation to Eddie Vedder. He is related to his little brother Beeper. My buddy Vetter's little brother Beeper...
Beeper Vedder?
Yep. Has a bar in Washburn, North Dakota. It's a great place. And he and I and Vetter...
What town?
Washburn, North Dakota.
I have a lot of family in Washburn.
Oh, no kidding.
In fact, quick segue. My sister and her boyfriend had been dating for about a year. So they had probably done it already.
Oh.
And he said, I got to go visit my grandma. She lives in Washburn. And she goes, oh, my family is from Washburn. And there was like a 15-hour little span of time where they thought it's very likely they're related. And so it just goes to show you should ask before you engage in some smashing.
Oh my God.
So Washburn, everything comes back to the beautiful little Washburn.
Yeah, it does. It really does. Those two guys were from Washburn, and they played with me in my very first metal band ever. But that's where was I going? Oh yeah, so Vetter
What was
and
the name of that band?
We never really did land a name, but I think the one we used most commonly was Waiting for James. But
Which sounds like a punk name.
Yeah, we had trouble naming the band. We didn't know what we were doing.
Was there a member of the band named James you were always waiting for? Or?
Yeah. That's we were always kind of waiting for him to show up. So
it sounds like a sequel to Sense and Sensibility.
Yeah, right.
It sounds like Emma Thompson's next movie is what it is. Waiting for James.
Yeah, it was a lovely name for a trashy band.
It's gonna be another Bridget Jones novel.
And actually, that band, our crowning achievement was we got to go out to St. Paul twice to Uptown Bar and open for a band that knew how to name a band. They were called Dumpster Juice. You knew what you were getting into. The lead singer of that band went out in a like a unitard, like a wrestling unitard, and just acted like he was completely trashed out of his mind the whole time, just stumbling around stage, just screaming into his microphone, and he'd stuff just big socks into this unitard, so it looks like his... You know what I'm talking about. Yeah, they were showmen. I learned a lot from watching those guys. Dumpster Juice. They were a good time.
Metal bands have the best names.
Yeah. I've wanted to start a band called the Wandering Groomsmen that only plays in hotel bars. And it looks like you just wandered away from a wedding and started playing is our thing. And then you'd crash a wedding during your breaks.
That's a good idea, but it'd get confusing when you start to come across those groomsmen that are actually walking away, that are actually doing
See,
that.
That's the thing is I want to incorporate them into the sets because everyone's got the voice of an angel if they just dig deep
starting
enough.
a band that only plays at weddings we weren't invited to.
Wow. Do that. That's awesome.
That's making me think of this has nothing to do with metal or music or anything, but I was at Fry and Pan today eating pancakes, and I thought, what if you had a superhero who when he would turn into Paul Bunyan, but only when he had been tricked into eating pancakes. So that's the only way he could trigger the Paul Bunyan. And then
if he chooses to eat pancakes,
it doesn't work.
He's the same.
Someone has to trick him into doing it. And then when he becomes Paul Bunyan, he has no memory of it. So there's this guy that doesn't understand why, but he keeps getting tricked into eating pancakes. And the thing is, like, his friends have to come up with new ways to do it. Otherwise, he won't be able to fight off evil.
So I'm trying to think of a situation in which I've been tricked into eating any breakfast food, and they're gonna have to come up with some pretty clever ideas.
I think
it sounds like a one series television.
What they would do is they would basically put pancakes inside of little pills, and then tell him the pills are for something else, and then he's like, "Oh yeah, that's my heart medication," and then he's got like a doctor that's with him all the time. He's like, "Oh, that meteor's coming towards the Earth. Hey, David, it's time for you to take your heart medication." He's like, "Didn't I already take it yesterday? You need to take it again today."
Tucker, when was the last time you made pancakes?
I've never made pancakes.
That's why you think you could easily put a pancake into a pill form.
Well, don't you just make the pancakes and then however much is inside the pill, you scoop up that much pancake and put it in the pill?
No.
Put in some butter and some syrup in there too?
See, that's the thing is the butter and the syrup are going to eat away at the lining.
Are you telling me you
of the
technically
pill.
couldn't fill a pill with pancakes?
I'm saying not in the way you're thinking. I'm saying if you could make real tiny little pancakes, that would be the best bet. But if that's the case, why not make injectable pancakes and they'll just stick him? Or does he have to ingest it?
He has to be tricked into eating it.
Okay.
Think of like the rules for Thor's hammer, right? It's just like there's like a magical, it has to happen that way. It has to happen this way.
This sounds more like an Incredible Hulk sort of thing. Like, is there some point in the movie where he turns to the camera and says, "The secret is, I just always have pancakes"?
No, I think the secret is in this scenario, Bruce Banner has no idea what's going on.
Oh, okay.
He's not even aware he's an Avenger. He's just like, I just like black out for periods of time, and then I'm always missing my clothes afterwards. It's weird, and no one ever tells him what's going on.
You know what I don't understand is if he turns into Paul Bunyan, is he a buck naked Paul Bunyan, or do they get that Paul Bunyan dressed?
It's a complete transubstantiation. So it's literally whatever he is, whatever mode he's in, he then grows.
But here's the thing. He's not Paul Bunyan if he's wearing denim shorts and a shirt that says, like, "Make America Pancakes
That's
again."
what I'm saying, though, that whatever he's wearing would just turn into what Paul Bunyan would be wearing.
And does it turn back into his regular clothes when he's done?
Yeah.
What about Babe the Blue Ox? Do you have to trick his dog into eating pancakes?
No, I think Babe the Blue Ox is a sort of a summon that only happens, that he can only summon in his Paul Bunyan form. So Paul Bunyan comes forth almost like Captain Planet, and then maybe with his axe at certain times can call forth Babe the Blue Ox.
Do you ever think maybe Captain Planet's really friggin' lonely? Because what if they have like a year where there's nothing that bad happens, for the environment, and he's sitting in whatever weird, dimension it is.
We always see him when he arrives, but we don't see what happens. They're like, "All right, man, you got to go back inside the rings."
Yeah,
now.
he's like, "No, I don't want. No.
Can I stay for a little bit longer?" No.
He gets sucked back in, just like how the genie.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Heavy metal.
Oh yeah, right.
What about heavy metal covers of other popular songs? That seems to be a YouTube darling.
Yeah, that's always good, and a lot of times the heavy metal version's better than the original.
Case in point.
I'd say one of my favorite heavy metal covers. I don't know if this counts because it's kind of a heavy metal cover of another heavy metal song, but it's a song by Overkill, and the original song is by the Edgar Winter Group. You ever heard Frankenstein? Well, it's kind of like a really jazzy, funky, heavy, hard rock song, and this band Overkill did a cover of it that just slays. And anytime I just want to stomp around the house a little bit, that's a good one to put on there. Warrant did a really cheesy cover of Queen's "We Will Rock You" back in the day, and I remember that was one of the first tapes I ever had. It was kind of really before I started getting into music.
Warrant is considered a heavy metal band, huh?
Yeah, sort of. They're like hair metal, but I remember putting that. We were on a car trip with the family, and I put it on, and my mom was doing like her old cheerleader routines to it. She was really pumped up by it, and I'm like, I'm never listening to that again. So.
Did you? Are you play video games, right?
Yeah.
Did you ever play through Brutal Legend?
Yeah, it's a cool game.
That's considered like heavy metal, right?
Yeah, for
a lot
sure.
of heavy metal influence in there. Have you ever played Brutal Legend?
No.
So Brutal Legend, the basis of the game is Jack Black voices a dude who is a roadie for a group that considers themselves heavy metal, but they're really just punk, or not even punk, but like pop trash.
Mm-hmm.
And they're hanging off the edge of this set that he builds, which is this giant like devil's head with horns coming out of the cheeks and a big chain.
Yep.
And one of them is hanging off the set, and he goes and he saves this thing's life, but he gets crushed to death. But instead of going to heaven or hell, he's transported to this world where heavy metal is life, and it's affected everything on this planet. So you've got these like warthog motorcycles that are half warthog, half motorcycle. And when you beef up the ride that you're using, you bring it into this underworld where Ozzy Osbourne plays like the ultimate mechanic. And my favorite part of that is when you're cruising around this huge expansive world, one of the things you get to do is listen to the radio, and the radio are all these great tunes. And it's where I fell in love with like Dr. Feelgood.
Yeah.
So many awesome tunes in that game. But that's a game where I know people who have no interest in heavy metal whatsoever, but they really, really like it. And I go, see, you do have an interest in heavy metal. You just needed the right medium to consume it.
Exactly. There's something there for everybody.
I wonder how much of that, though, that I never thought I would like metal, or I would never consider myself someone who is a metalhead, is from what people imagine a metalhead is. So they have this image in their head of someone in a stanky bar with long hair, and they're headbanging, and they just want to fucking party all the time, and that's it.
Yep.
And while a lot of that imagery is in there, that's in completely surface level when it comes to these performers in this music. And if you actually took the time to like you're saying, sit down and listen to it and realize, oh, there is something here that I like, you'll find it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's good they bring that up, JJ, because that is the look and the feel of heavy metal. It's got the chains and the spikes and the skulls and the devil imagery, and it's got the most iconic thing in heavy metal, which is the metal horns. And your listeners can't see it, but I've got the iconic metal horn shape up that you throw up at concerts and you headbang with that up. That was originally invented by Ronnie James Dio. He would go out to the stage and put out those horns out there, and everybody would do it back. And so we have Dio to thank for the horns. And as far as the spikes and the leather and that whole sort of look, well, that comes from a guy named Rob Halford. And he was the lead singer of an incredible heavy metal band you've all probably heard of, Judas Priest. And they were real pioneers in the field. And he is a very gay man who's very much into S&M and was into S&M at the time. And so he was just always wearing like leather and chaps and chains and stuff. And he'd be going to these British S&M bars and then come out of there and hit the stage basically. And that whole look came out of the S&M gay scene in Britain. And which is interesting because heavy metal at the time was pretty machismo, is pretty like dude tough. I wouldn't say it was homophobic per se. I mean, there's not a lot of like message in heavy metal, a lot of verses against gay people. It's just like you're there to be tough and mean, and it seems to cut against the grain of what it was perceived to be gay back then. And here comes Rob Halford, the gayest guy you'll probably meet all week, giving heavy metal its look and its feel, and it has persisted to this day. And you look at a game like Brutal Legend, and it's sort of a send-up of that look and feel, and people who like heavy metal recognize that, but they also still totally embrace that. It's still freaking cool to get up on stage and just all black and just command the presence of the room. I mean, there's no there's no idle talk happening when you're up there playing heavy metal. There's nothing else going on except people listening to what you're saying. So, I mean, you look like whatever you want, really. And that look has persisted. It's just kind of on some level still really cool, I think, anyway.
Even though this band wasn't metal at all, I feel like Queen is a band that there's a lot of DNA in metal and in that showmanship and that Freddie Mercury as a performer in general. It like set the stage for so many different things, but that kind of virtuosity and that interest in making longer pieces and having the dynamic energy to it. I see that a lot too.
Definitely. Queen, they are a hard rock band for sure. And that's an interesting conversation is what's the difference between a hard band and a heavy band? And that's a whole other podcast. But Queen definitely could straddle that. They could be really heavy. In fact, they've got a song called Stone Cold Crazy, which is pretty much a thrash metal song. And in fact, Metallica did an awesome heavy metal cover of Stone Cold Crazy. And they didn't have to do it very different at all. I mean, it's a heavy, fast song. So, yeah, Queen, they rock, man. If you don't like Queen and you don't get how big of a virtuoso they are, you just don't get
There's
music.
something wrong with it if you don't like Queen.
Yeah.
So how does heavy metal get such a stake when it's something that's so difficult to play on the radio? Because I think of like, you take a classic rock band like an AC/DC, and that's just about as heavy as you can get on 99% of the radio stations out there. And sure, there's some that kind of slip by a little bit. Heck, I was a DJ on a rock station for a while, and I remember we weren't playing, Metallica every hour. You maybe got like one Metallica song a day, like on a station like that. And you certainly weren't playing stuff that was sort of on the cusp. So do you think the advent of the internet and people being able to seek it out more, or do you think this is one of those mediums where bands grow the way bands used to grow by people trading albums who are of the similar, sect of music lover?
Well, it used to be you could have a really heavy band and be a commercial success. And that was like the 80s and early 90s. Those days are gone. These days, and I don't follow a lot of the new bands coming up, but I imagine they got to do it like everybody else. Get a YouTube channel, and not only you can't just get away with music anymore, you have to do music and video. It's such a medium that requires both now. So I think that's how bands got to make it these days. It's just because you're not going to make it selling albums. You're probably not going to sell enough T-shirts. Touring's expensive. You're probably not going to break even there. I don't even know how you get it done this day and age.
Well, I mean, you're a heavy metal fan. You're a super fan.
Yeah.
And yet it still is something that sort of the new groups are elusive to you in a way, unless someone says, hey, I saw this, or my cousin sent it to me online.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right? I mean, you're not... is there a Sirius XM type following to this where that's, another avenue that you think people could go?
Yeah, definitely. I don't do enough seeking on my own, I guess, these days, but there's some good bands coming up that you can find. Just put it on Pandora. I would start, personally, my favorite band out there that's still going is the Devin Townsend Project, and he used to front a band called Strapping Young Lad, which is probably one of the heaviest bands I've ever heard in my life. They're so awesome, virtuosic. I would recommend going and check out anything by Devin Townsend. He's probably the most contemporary, heaviest guy I listen to right now. High on Fire is really great out there. I think I mentioned Goat Horror earlier. They're super awesome heavy. They got a funny name, but I got to open for them a couple times too. Once here in Fargo and once in the cities, so they're near and dear to my heart.
Name some of the band names you've been with. I mean, so we talked about your original band.
Yep. Well, I was originally in Waiting for James, and then went off to St. Paul and went to school there for guitar performance, actually. I wanted to start the world-ending heavy metal band out there, just travel world and crush everything. Never happened, I guess. But I was in a few bands out there. It never coalesced around a name. And then I came back to Fargo and played in a band with my little brother and his friends. It was called Nex. That was pretty much like a death metal, black metal kind of band. Really complex instrumentation. Those guys were talented songwriters. It's fun playing with them, but we were all a little too immature to make that work. And then after that, I moved on to a band called Chronocide, which Tucker actually was doing a project, really clever project called A Movie a Month at the time that we were touring as Chronocide. And we were a power trio, and we needed a music video, and Tucker was doing one movie a month, which is a crazy project, but he agreed to do a music video for us for his movie, and that was just a ton of fun. Big, hard working process. Tucker, credit, you did great stuff.
And in that music video, JJ, whilst holding a Barbie, gets a machete in his beehole.
Yep. Yep.
That was one of those situations where it doesn't matter how much you explain what's happening, it's hard to find the motivation.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. And I believe you debuted that at one of your Release the Beast
Yeah.
Halloween parties.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Because we started working on a concept for it in 2010 that December, but then I didn't follow through, and so we didn't actually start like really working on the video until the following September, I want to say. So I mean, that was the one movie that did not get finished in 2010. But then once we started working on it, it probably took us about 2 weeks to make it.
Interesting.
And I remember. Sorry.
And then just played it there. And Pam Straight, who has been on the podcast before, is the hero of the video. Yeah.
Yeah. It was great. And I remember some of the initial footage we got for that. We had a concept of like a green screen thing of a big skyscraper that we were going to apply a lot of After Effects to. And it ended up being a bigger project than I know I was willing to tackle on my end.
Yeah. I'm getting better at figuring out when I've got project creep going on.
Right.
When things just become way too big. But
what was cool about that is we filmed a bunch of really neat little like murder scenes in front of a green screen, brought everyone we knew out there, and that was the first night I met a friend of mine, Jimmy Mathange, and he ended up getting stabbed by a rusty knife in the process of filming this. Like, I just meet the guy, and 5 minutes later, he's bleeding for the cause. You know, it's like that's heavy metal for you. But that was it's a fun video to make. Thanks, Tucker, for bringing us through that.
That was fun.
Well, now that you guys are done patting each other on the back so much, so I'm going to go to a heavy metal show. What do I need to know before I walk in? What should I be wearing? What should I be wearing earplugs? Should I come expecting to get, a little physical?
You know what? You don't have to do anything you do different day to day if you're going to a heavy metal show. I know a lot of guys that are like, oh, geez, what shirt do I wear? Do I wear an ACDC?
Very not metal to worry about what shirt you're going to be wearing at a concert.
Right, when we were opening for Goat Horror in the City, a friend of mine came out to see the show, and he brought a friend of his who had that very dilemma. Like, I've never been to a metal show. He had this crisp new AC/DC shirt on. It's like, dude,
got to swing by Target on the way,
exactly.
you guys.
Like, you don't got to worry about it, man. Just show up how you want. If you don't want to get roughed up, you don't have to get in the mosh pit. You just hang off on the sides. You'll probably smell a little bit of weed. If you don't have a problem with that, you'll be fine. Heavy metal and weed go together like, oh my God, like peanut butter and jelly.
Everything else.
Yeah, exactly.
Weed and every other kind of music.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
So,
even jazz, weed and jazz.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Especially jazz.
Well,
You kidding me?
weed and Tailored Swift.
Especially
Yeah,
for
it's more of a
music that you
buzzkill.
might not like when you're sober.
Yeah,
Especially
like-
for that music too.
Like weed and just sounds just like it's like water dripping in a pan.
like weed and club music doesn't go together at all.
That's a good point. So I guess not every kind of music. Yeah. Cocaine, however.
Right.
And club
Well, I
music.
think like ecstasy.
Yeah. Oh,
Right.
yeah.
I mean, that's what people are really getting into.
Well, no, they're starting with cocaine and they're going to ecstasy.
I think you go ecstasy first and then cocaine. Right?
I think cocaine,
What's easier to get a hold of, ecstasy or cocaine?
we need Freddie here.
Right.
Unfortunately, we don't have Freddie here.
That's one of those things where I've always worried that if I tried cocaine, I'd be really good at it. And I would love it. And so in the 2 times in my life I've been offered cocaine, I declined it and immediately was a little bit like, well, I just gave up a life
I
opportunity.
would love to see you on cocaine.
I'd be so good at it, right?
I think you would be.
I mean, it would probably be my element. I also thought, man alive, I wish I was born earlier because I would have loved Studio 54. Those would have been the glory days.
Yeah.
Tony, we were talking earlier about subgenres and metal. And you listed off a couple.
Yep.
Does that still happen? Are we still getting new subgenres of metal? And if so, what are some of the most recent ones? And do you agree with all of these things being subgenres of metal?
Yeah, we're still getting new subgenres of metal. I think of the most recent ones, they're like, and I'm probably dating myself here, it's probably old by now, but like some of the new ones are gent. It's spelled DJENT, and it's
Gent metal?
Yeah, gent. And the thing that brings that genre together is the fact that you could play pretty much any gent song on a single string. And in fact, they've got things called gent sticks, which is just a stick with a guitar string on it that you plug into an amp, and then you just hammer away on that one string, because it's really more about pulling a percussive sound together and being really tight as a like a staccato band. It's about the rhythm, it's about the just hitting the breakdowns. It's not a music I really care for, but it's definitely, they're still popping in and out, just like they always will, I imagine. They're really as distinct as they ever were. So I would say some of my favorite genres of music that don't get a lot of attention is a genre of heavy metal called power metal. And I think if heavy metal is a little scary for some people, this is a good entrance to it, because power metal is all about bombastic presentation of the music, and it doesn't often involve growly lyrics. So it's usually song operatic lyrics. It's cheesy. It's cheesy as all hell. And when you think of like the cheesiest, hairiest heavy metal, power metal is at the top of that, because it's all about like Lord of the Rings and, orcs and goblins and Viking metal. And one of my favorite power metal bands is called Blind Guardian, and they've got a whole album called Nightfall in Middle Earth dedicated to the first third of Tolkien's Silmarillion book. The Silmarillion, if people don't know Lord of the Rings lore, is like the Bible of Middle Earth. It reads like a Bible. And these heavy metal nerds, Blind Guardian, they're from Germany actually, did an album based on the Silmarillion. And when you record any type of music, you have a certain amount of tracks. As we sit here in this studio, we have 3 microphones going, so we've got 3 tracks in your recording software. When you record an album, sometimes you get up of 20, 30 tracks of every individual drum, maybe a bunch of different guitar parts. On Nightfall in Middle Earth, the least amount of tracks that you have on any single album or on any single song on that album is 72 tracks.
Oh my God.
They're just layering guitars and opera and choir and drums and horns and orchestra, and it's just this wall of sound. It is epic in a way that only Lord of the Rings could be, and bombastic in the way it could only be in. And it's cheesy, but you're also listening to just like, what the fuck? How are these people doing this? It's just very virtuosic, very huge. Check it out. Blind Guardian, Nightfall in Middle Earth, 72 tracks.
Power metal.
What
Power
about
metal.
is it Rammstein?
Rammstein,
Is
yep.
that a band, right?
Yep.
I hear them mentioned. Are they heavy metal?
Because they're pretty, metal is really big in Germany and Scandinavian countries, right?
Yep. Rammstein's from Germany. Their big song, Du Hast, I think is probably the one that most people know them by. I would call them like industrial metal, I guess. But yeah, it's interesting how much metal comes out of Europe, and especially out of Sweden, because you can get government subsidy there to do the arts in Sweden, and it really doesn't matter what the arts are. So you can start a church-burning death metal band in Sweden and get government money to get that done. And there is some amazing death metal bands that come out of Sweden.
So for those of you who don't know Tony, this is the ultimate conundrum, because he could move to Sweden and basically be guaranteed like a career, like a like a metal life, but if not for the subsidy. I just think it's funny.
Yeah, well,
Why not?
if you're going to spend government money on anything, it may as well be heavy metal, right?
Tony ran for tax commissioner in the Libertarian Party ticket.
Yeah.
And was the chairman of the Libertarian Party in North Dakota for a year, right?
Yeah, a couple of years as chairman. Ran for tax commissioner before that, and I was running to actually abolish the office. So I didn't win, but I did set records cast for Libertarian candidate at that time. So that was fun.
Which is very metal.
Interesting to see the process, but I don't know. Don't go into politics.
It is messed up, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, start to finish, it's messed up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's horse trading. It's
I'm
like,
glad you
whatever.
didn't win.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Sometimes I think of things I've run for in politics, and I'm like, man, thank God I didn't win that.
That's right. You ran for city council?
I ran for mayor and then
Mayor, that's
school
right.
board.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So I'll just keep working my way down.
You can get comptroller, I'm sure.
Yeah. Do we have a comptroller here?
I don't know.
I think that's an
comptroller
assigned
does.
position.
I don't know if there are any trolls to comp. Troll. I don't know. No
It's a
clue.
glorified accountant.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I don't know what trolls need. Do they have a 1099 they fill out?
They do.
That
Independent
sucks.
contractors. I don't know what the new tax laws in our Trump, though, what it is for trolls, but I think
You know
it's
what?
pretty good.
I always
I
wondered.
think it's pretty good for trolls in Trump's
There are
America.
very few privately owned bridges in the world where like someone actually just owns the bridge straight out. So that troll that was living under the bridge in Billy Goat's Gruff,
Yep.
that's not his bridge.
Yeah.
That's the city, state, or county's bridge.
Right. That's right. He's
know?
trespassing.
He is full on.
Unless he's like, bullshit, my tax dollars went to pay for this bridge. I'll live underneath it if I want.
He's a
you
sovereign
remember-
citizen troll.
In North Fargo, the toll bridge that was up there, and there's a big to do about whether or not it needed to be turned over to a different state, and like the time is up and it's paid for itself, yada yada yada. I thought a great campaign for that would have been somebody to live under the bridge as the troll of the toll bridge. But no one really thought that was as clever as I did.
And you didn't win mayor? That's
I know, right?
He didn't come in last.
Yeah, I did not come in last. A media mogul did.
Oh,
Is that what he was?
Yeah, he owned like KVRR when it first started out,
But his whole platform was to build more of the skywalk.
which
Oh.
oddly enough was a huge discussion in the last city election in Fargo about finishing the Skyway so that all of these buildings could be interconnected and you wouldn't have to go outside. Also, just to throw this bullshit out there too, when I ran for mayor, I said two things I really want. Number one, Island Park at the southwest corner of Island Park. It's a two-way stop. It needs to be a four-way stop. I don't understand why it's not a four-way stop. It's a park. Kids and families are crossing all the time. You know what they just did last year? Made it a four-way stop.
Oh.
I also said, wouldn't it be keen if we had a downtown skating rink? And then they built a downtown skating rink, and everyone's like, oh, what a great idea. Thank God. And I'm like, I said that in 2006. Are you guys freaking kidding me?
So speaking of politicians, it's for the longest time we've seen politicians show their constituents that they have some musical ability, right? So Bill Clinton famously playing the saxophone on
Arsenio Hall.
I almost said Montel Williams, and I was like, nope, that's not who it is. But him playing saxophone, we've seen different, like, be in quartets, and stuff like that. We have yet to see a politician who's like, yeah, I used to play metal. Beto O'Rourke's kind of close because he was in a
He's
punk,
a punk band. Yep.
and can still thrash if he wanted to. But we have yet have someone, I think, that I can tell who was like, yeah, in my as a young man, I was in this metal band and we played, all this shit.
Well, yeah, the thing about being in a metal band is you also don't plan on a career in politics. The things that lead you down one path kind of preclude you often from the other. I hope.
Okay, first of all, not to interrupt you here, but like, are you looking at anything that's going on in our country right now?
I used to, yeah. I guess I used to. But on the other hand, politics is a lot about showmanship. And if, I've heard it said that Washington is Hollywood for ugly people. Like if you've got an ego and you need to be out in front of everybody and you want to be taken seriously, but you're not talented and you don't look good, you can go to Washington and become a powerful, rich person and still do really well. So, and a lot of people, set out to do good and instead do very well indeed. And that's just too bad. But
Here's how I gauge the amount of power someone has. The number of decks they have on their home. If you've got 3 decks, if you've got like a deck off the master bedroom, one off the kitchen, and then a front porch, you're rich.
yeah.
You're real rich. You know who probably had that was Ronnie James Dio.
Oh man, that guy's decked out. I just know it.
How do you think he would feel about the fact that, the India's Hugh Bison like to throw up the horns now too? It's been co-opted in so many ways. You'll see a Target or Walmart commercial where get the coolest styles for your kids this winter, and it's got some rock and roll and this kid's throwing up the horns, right?
Yeah. The horns get overused for sure. It's like using the Lord's name in vain, I guess, if that's the thing you worry about. You just they lose their power. It's like using the word awesome for everything. Like, hey, I got that report on awesome. It's not.
How much of that do you think, though, comes also from people who liked metal as kids and then they grew up and now they're running the ad agency for Target and they're running this and running that? So we're seeing a reflection of what used to not be considered okay, but then those kids grew up and now it is okay. Does that take the edge off of metal, do you think?
Yes, they need to be more responsible where they use that shit.
Well, I know we've got 2 albums in our CD collection at home of heavy metal lullabies. Where they take classic heavy metal tunes, but they turn them into lullabies. And I mean, they don't have this, there's no aggression to them, I would say, but like, I still really appreciate the music.
Are they sung or is it growl?
I like that you
lyrics,
have
or-
2 of these.
2 of these. Well, because one was, I think we bought them online and there was like, hey, congratulations. You can also get, like hard rockin' lullabies too. No, they're all instrumental.
Interesting. Well, that's not so far-fetched because there's a genre of metal out there called stoner metal or weed metal or whatever, and there's a band of that genre called Sleep. And if you ever just need to catch a nap, turn Sleep on at 11. They play songs at like 20 beats per minute, like just glacial, slow, huge sound feedback, just nonstop. And the one song is like 45 minutes long. They've got one album called Jerusalem, I think it's called. It's one song. It's the whole album. It's super slow. It'll put you to sleep if that's what you need.
So if there really is then no real perceivable aggression in that song, what makes it qualify as metal still?
It's aggressive. It's loud.
Okay.
It's obtuse. It's just slow.
Got it. Okay.
It's really loud guitars. It's Orange Amps, which is a brand of amp, and just turned up to 11 and.
Okay.
Yeah. Actually, there was a band here in Fargo that did sort of I wouldn't call them stoner metal, but they were definitely like a slow doom metal, glacier metal kind of slow band, and they were called Strong Like Bear, and they were just awesome out of Fargo. Fargo's had some really good heavy metal bands. Strong Like Bear was really good. They tuned their guitars down to a low A. Like Metallica tunes to an E. My favorite band I mentioned earlier, Strapping Young Lad, they tuned down to a C sharp. At the Gates, which is a band out of Sweden, tunes down to a B, and Strong Like Bear tuned down even further to a low A, and it's just like you're getting down to the point where notes will start to become not perceptible, just because the strings flop around so much. It's hard to get them to do anything, but they made it work. They just made it sound just massive, like Godzilla was walking down the street, and that was really cool. So kudos to those guys if they're listening. I would say other bands in Fargo that are amazing. Gorgatron is probably the premier band in Fargo right now. They're a death metal band. They're really good, really well rehearsed. They've been on a few tours. They do a really great media presence online. It's fun following their Facebook page. And the guys in the band are super cool, really approachable and down to earth. And they just got to open for Anthrax and Testament when they came and played at Sanctuary. Gorgatron opened for them, and it was really cool to see them get their due because, man, they're good.
That's sweet.
Another band in town called Brutalor. They've got umlauts over the U's in their name. They're just a ton of fun. They call themselves, I think, trash metal is the genre they call themselves. It's run by a guy named Nate Tannick, who does a charity, I think, that gets guitar, like he'll get a guitar amp combo to a kid in need, or somebody that it's a charity to get that together. I wish I knew more details about that, but it's really cool what he does there. So there's some great bands in Fargo run by great guys, and a town like this, there's so much talent here, and those guys are ready for the big time. They're ready for nationwide exposure. But
Hey,
it's hard to do from the middle of the continent.
Speaking of exposure, you brought some stuff with you today.
Yeah, I brought my guitar and a few pedals.
What? Why are you looking at me?
Is that a complete thought? I'm not
Speaking
sure.
of exposure, you brought some stuff with you today. So we're going to expose Tony's stuff to this. That's a complete thought.
Okay.
Did you want me to say...
Brent, write in and tell us if that was a complete thought.
Tony,
Yep.
I see that you brought many items here, including cords, amplifier, bags, guitar, pick. What are you going to do with these items?
I do have them all here. I think you missed a few items too, but we can
Fuck
revisit
you, Tony.
I just brought all this stuff in, not really to perform anything, because you can't really play heavy metal as a one person per se. It doesn't really come off that great. But I just brought it in to demonstrate a few things about heavy metal, about how to get that that heavy metal tone, about what makes it work.
So let me ask you this first. Looking at your guitar, why'd you pick this particular axe?
This axe is a Brendan Small's signature series guitar, and it's of the body shape is called an Explorer body type. And it's pretty iconic. Anybody who's seen Metallica playing has seen the Explorer body. And this particular one, the signature series, is by a guy named Brendan Smalls, who you might know from doing cartoon Home Movies. He also
really?
did. Yep, exactly.
Holy shit.
He's a pretty accomplished musician, and he did another cartoon series called Death Clock. Have you ever heard of that?
I sure have.
Or Metalocalypse is called. And the band in the show is called Death Clock. And he wrote and performed all the music for that show. And he got a signature series guitar made called Thunder Horse, which is one of the Death Clock songs, one of their best songs. It's really cool, thunderous tune. So I picked up the guitar. I love the sunburst look on it. I love the Explorer shape. It's fun to sling low on stage and just do some really cool stuff with it. So I brought this in not necessarily, like I said, to play any music, full songs or anything, but to demonstrate some things that make heavy metal. I can show you quickly how to write a heavy metal song. It's really pretty easy if you understand just a few things about scales and what makes that sound. So hopefully I don't blow us out of the... Hear that? Okay, so for any gearheads out there, I'm playing through a bunch of pedals on the floor, and you can get that crunchy heavy metal tone a few different ways. You can get it through your amp. If you turn your amp up loud, you get that. Or you can put a pedal between your guitar and your amp that makes that sound, and I've got a couple of those that do that. I've got a really iconic one that some of the biggest bands out of Sweden would record all their albums of, and I'm thinking of bands like At the Gates and Entombed. If you're a big heavy metal fan, you know the sound of the heavy metal HM2 distortion pedal. And I'm playing it through a Fishman acoustic guitar amp, so if any gearheads out there, I'm sorry, but here we go. So that's the sound of heavy metal, and the chord that I'm playing is an E5 power chord. And power chords are what heavy metal is all about. And the way you make a power chord is you start with a single note, and then you go up the scale 5, basically 5 notes up the scale, and then you play that note too. So you play the original note, and then 5 notes above it, up the scale, and you get a power chord. And that's what heavy metal is all about, power chords. And you hear those in pretty much every song. The other thing that makes heavy metal really huge beyond the power chords is the scale, the minor scale that's used often. So everyone remembers from the music classes minor scales. Well, there's a particular note in a minor scale that makes something sound really heavy, and it's called a tritone. And starting from your original note, if you're looking at a guitar, you'd go up 6 frets and hit that note. Something about that tritone just makes things sound so heavy. And the first guy to really start doing that was a guy named Paganini. Around the turn of the 1800s, he'd start putting that tritone in his music, which people would normally never do. And when he started doing it, he'd be walking around the town and people would poke him to see if he was demon, to see if he was real or possessed, because to put that in was like the devil's music. And what makes that powerful is you can be playing heavy stuff, but if you're playing a major chord or a major scale, it doesn't really sound super heavy. But if you put in that Paganini there, that tritone, now it sounds heavy. That's what it's all about.
Huge difference.
Yep. So you always want to get that 6th fret in there, that Paganini tritone. Get your minor scales, your tritones, your huge sound, your power chords, and my God, you've got yourself a heavy metal song going.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Have you written a lot of tunes yourself?
I have.
Yeah.
It's something I love to do is write heavy metal songs and record them. I've got an EP out there if anybody's interested. You can search for Chronicide or hit me up. I'd be happy to send you what I got.
What about some, like, can we hear like a riff or two from Tony Mangnall original?
Sure, we can do... Well, here's the song from the music video we did, Tucker. The song is called Neo Sapien. So,
How much does heavy
Awesome.
metal
Love
open itself to like improvisation? Like if you're in there and you're in the middle of a song, can you really branch out, or is it something that tends to throw off the rest of the group?
I would say most heavy metal is pretty well scripted. Even your solos down to the note, you kind of want to know what note goes where. Yeah, you're better off scripting it. Blues and rock and roll, you can kind of get away with that, but heavy metal, man, it's so precise. Like the best of it is just really precise stuff, and it's the precision that can just drop your jaw to the floor. So, that's a good question. I haven't really thought much about it, but I'm just not really thinking of a lot of guys just playing off the cuff.
Well, and watching you play, I'm thinking to myself that same thing of like, well, geez, if he just decides to, take this in a different direction because he's feeling something, the rest of the group is going to be, a little lost in the paces.
Yep.
Versus you've got like Dave Matthews, and it's fine for him to play the cymbal for 25 minutes
Right.
while people buy nachos and flip their collars. So, and I find that to be very interesting because I, while I like improvisation, I also think it could be kind of lazy.
Yeah, I agree.
The nature of improvisation for comedy wise, I don't have to learn lines. I don't need a set. I don't have any blocking. I show up and I'm funny. And as long as I am paying attention to what's going on, everyone follows along, but it'll never look or sound as crisp as something that's been rehearsed and, plotted out. And so heavy metal kind of is in that same vein of where the rehearsals for songs must be really intense.
It is really intense, and it leads to a certain sort of snobism from heavy metal musicians when they look at other genres, and made me not even like punk music for a long time because it's like you go to all this effort to write one song and just craft this finely tuned piece of music, and then somebody picks up, like I said, a guitar, and 2 weeks later he's on stage. It's like, buddy, what do you think you're doing? I mean, I've been playing for years, and I'm still not getting it right. And I don't know. I'm not saying one's better than the other necessarily.
Sounds like you are.
But, there's definitely genres of music that I don't have any respect for because there's no effort in making it. And I'm thinking of like a lot of house music. Some guy shows up, a DJ, and presses play on his laptop. I know I'm ruffling some feathers out there, and there's probably some good types of that music out there that I'm giving short shrift to. But I mean, there's just something to be said about a guy who puts in the time and effort to make an instrument to pull as much out of it as possible. And I just I always have some respect for that. So
Does metal music make use of specifically the bass guitar in a way that's different than other genres of music? Or is there a particular instrument that it usually gets used one way, but when in metal is sort of treated differently?
Probably the most iconic instrument in metal, the bass is important, and what you'll hear on the bass that you won't hear a lot of other music is a distorted bass guitar sent through a pedal or something. But the most iconic instrument, I think, for heavy metal, besides the distorted guitar, is the double kick drum on the trap kit, because you don't hear a lot of double kick. And this is where some of the most virtuoso playing comes out of heavy metal is the drummer, because he's typically got on each foot, most drummers, they got a boom and they got a chick for the snare, and then they got their other hand playing the hi-hat, so they're, boom, chick, AC/DC type stuff. Heavy metal drummers have a foot on a pedal and each pedal kicks either a separate kick drum or it's a two-header beater that kicks a single kick drum, but the sum result is that each foot is hitting a bass drum, and so they can start to go incredibly fast, just really fast rolls like that. You start to get some metal bands. I think of bands like Cataclysm and Nile. Their drummers double kicking at 240 beats a minute. Oof. And it's just like machine gun fast, superhuman fast, and it's
like
just
how many beats a hummingbird has for its heart.
Yeah, it's just crazy. I mean, you have to like catch it happening on one of those super fast cameras, just to see exactly what this guy's feet is doing. But it's incredible. And if you get a guitar and a bass going chugga 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 along with a kick drum, and they're all immaculately timed, I mean, it's just like, it's when it all comes together. It's so powerful.
I caught a show of Tony's years ago at the Nestor, and I forget who you opened for. But so I watched your band, and then they went on stage, and the music was actually so heavy I was feeling it in my sternum, and I was like, I don't think I can stay here. Like, I was getting pounded so fucking hard by this metal music that I was like, I kind of feel like I gotta leave, otherwise I'm gonna freak out.
Can I tell you a truth?
Mm-hmm.
So the closest I've been to pooping my pants as an adult was at a heavy metal show. And it's because the bass was rumbling my gut so much that I barely made it to the bathroom. And the line I was in, everybody else was in the same spot.
Yeah,
no one was there
your
to
brown.
pee. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I find that to be just awesome.
Yeah, you know, if you'd gone up to the band afterward and told them that, they would have just been so thrilled, like
Thanks,
just so
man.
flattered.
Thanks. Good
It's
to
the
know that
nicest
we're
thing
doing
anyone
the
ever
right
said.
thing.
Yeah.
I wish I could remember the name of that band too. I remember it was a show at the what's that bowling
Jethro
alley?
Tull.
No, it was not Jethro Tull.
You know, are you referencing Jethro Tull winning the best heavy metal album
With the flute?
Yeah, with the year that Metallica put out Injustice for All. Oh, my God, Jethro Tull wins it. What a travesty!
How does that happen?
I don't know. I have no idea.
Well, I think for some respects, some people just don't understand what heavy metal is.
Right, and that's why we're here today.
Right.
To make
And
sure that never happens
they're
again.
confusing multiple genres.
Yep.
And that's part of the problem, right? It's why in Fargo, best Mexican food can go 2 years in a row to like Taco Bell.
Right.
They're like, they got taco in the name right there. Someone brought up a point the other day that like Taco John's sounds like you're eating tacos made out of a guy named John. And I was like, okay, so Taco Bell, like, yep, you're eating a bell.
See, it sounds to me like you're eating tacos while on the toilet.
Mm-hmm.
It's the taco toilet.
Why are there not toilets shaped like tacos?
I don't know why we haven't started a business called Toilet Tacos.
Right. Or toilet paper that looks like tortillas. All right, so obviously we got a business plan. Tony, thank you so much. If people want to find you, how are they going to find you?
Oh, man, I'm not a very public-facing person, but I guess you can find me on Facebook. Just look for Tony Mangnall on Facebook, and
It's not
friend
as
me.
Anthony?
No, it's. I think it's Tony.
Okay.
I was thinking maybe like a band website.
Although you should spell Mangnall because they will not spell it correctly.
It's M as in man, A, N as in Nancy, G as in goat, N as in Nancy, A, L, L. And as far as like finding my music, I think Chronocide's out there on SoundCloud. So if you search Chronocide, which is like Chrono, CHRONO, like time, and side, CIDE, like genocide, put it together, it means killing massive amounts of time. Chronocide. So you can look for that. You can hear the song Neo Sapien. If actually go to YouTube and you search Chronocide Neo Sapien, you'll see the video
There you go.
that Tucker put together for us.
We'll
And-
make sure to post it on our Facebook page too.
Yeah, for sure.
Nice. Excellent.
And just get out there and listen to some heavy metal, man. Just fucking get the metal horns up, get home from work, throw a chair across the room, and let the magic of heavy metal take you away.
All right. Thanks, Tony.
Thank you.
JJ Meets World.
Well, that does it, podcast listeners. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for subscribing to JJ Meets World. To the folks who are listening on Spotify, thank you. The folks listening on iTunes, thank you. The folks listening on Google Play, thank you. The folks who are just turning it on library computers and letting it play, we really thank you. We also would thank you to go to patreon.com/JJ Meets World. I believe it's a /, and send a couple of dollars our way. We don't charge you anything for JJ Meets World. We ask that if you like it, throw a couple of bucks our way. It's going to help us continue to upgrade equipment, our studio space, and maybe at one point we'll have a website that'll have Flash animation on it. Don't count on it. If you want to check out Mr. Tucker Lucas, my producer extraordinaire, you're going to head over to the website moonbasemaria.com. There's a www right in front of it. On that website, you can see things like a movie a month, including the music video that we talked about in this episode. And if you want to get a hold of me, your host with the most, head on over to linebenders.com. You can find everything there, including my home mailing address, which some of you are really making use of. Appreciate that. Freaks out the fiance. So let's get this thing going. And I was just reading a book called Candy Girl, which is written by Diablo Cody about her time stripping in Minneapolis. And my experience with that is like, I've been there. And the only other time that happened to me was when I was reading Willy Wonka and they were talking about the kid falling in the chocolate river.